Hey everybody, here we are again with another My Collection video. Much like the last one, this is kind of an in-between video from my big story of videos. And also, this is gonna be not scripted at all, just kind of off the cuff. I'm gonna go through my collection or a part of my collection and just talk about my experiences with these particular games, how I feel about them, if I like them or not, and give you a little blurb about them. This is going to be on the Sega CD. That was a console add-on actually. But yeah, it's kind of divisive, I understand, but we'll get into it. So without any further ado, let's do this thing. Let's get into it. So the Sega CD is one of my favorite consoles ever made, and you don't hear that a lot. The console is kind of looked down upon by a lot of people in the community. I think there's people that have memories of it and that they do enjoy aspects of it, but as a whole, it is kind of seen as a failure, which I wouldn't say it was a huge success, but it wasn't an absolute failure. I think it ended up selling somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million units. Which for an add-on, a CD add-on that was pretty pricey at the time, that's not terrible, I guess. But it wasn't the success that Sega was wanting it to be. If memory serves, it was the most successful CD-based add-on of the time, so there's that. But all that aside, yes, I love the Sega CD. One of the reasons that I love the Sega CD much is actually, in fact, one of the reasons it is seen so negatively by so many people, and that is FMVs. And for those of you that don't know, FMV stands for full motion video, and that's full motion video games such as like Night Trap and Double Switch, Corpse Killer, things like that. Those games, the games that are like movie games where you're watching video and you make decisions or have on-rail sections, things like that. Quite a few of those in the Sega CD catalog. Actually, it was quite an over-reliance on them. It was a new technology, and I remember back then in like the early 90s, late 80s, and seeing this new video emerge of like actual video. The video game industry for a long time has always been trying to emulating the movie industry. It still does to a degree nowadays, even though the video game industry makes much more money than the movie industry even now. As far as like aesthetics, it's always been trying to emulate that industry. So now we straight up had movies that you interacted with. I always thought that was really cool. Yeah, it didn't look so great, especially in retrospect. We look back and we're like, wow, that was grainy, especially on the Sega CD. Still, I really enjoyed the damn thing. My two passions in life have always been obviously video games and movies. I'm really big into movies as well. This was a melding of the two, so it was a match made in heaven. I fully acknowledge that many of these games, it's a stretch to even call them games at times, but is what it is. I enjoy the experiences, if you will, and we're going to talk about some of those today. Not all FMV games. There were actually other games on the Sega CD, and some really good games too, and we're going to get to some of those. One of the games on there is extremely good and very valuable, and we're going to talk about that one as well. So Sega CD, let's talk about it. And the first game on the list of one of my favorite consoles that I'm trying to convince you is not that bad is Cliffhanger on the Sega CD. Not off to a good start, are we? So Cliffhanger is not an FMV game. It is primarily, I'd call it maybe a beat 'em up or a side-scrolling beat 'em up in the vein of like Streets of Rage. It does have some FMV in it from the movie Cliffhanger. If you're not aware of the movie Cliffhanger, awesome movie. Really check it out. It's one of Sly Stallone's last like truly great his era movies. But yeah, great movie, really exciting, fun. Got clips from the movie in there, but that's not the game. That's just cinematics. Now the gameplay itself is, like I said, mainly just side-scrolling beat 'em up, much like Streets of Rage, just not as good. It's not awful. It's just kind of there. It's like, yeah, that was fine, I guess. There's some light platforming in there as well. Climbing up like mountains and jumping from platform to platform. That stuff is fine. That's not where this game gets its reputation for being so bad. Where it gets that reputation starts with level 2, I believe it is, depending on which version you have, because there is a Genesis version of this as well. It is more or less identical as far as the beat 'em up levels. There may be some very minute differences, but it is essentially the exact same game. Looks the same. It probably sounds better on the Sega CD because it usually had like Red Book audio and stuff like that. Pretty much the same game. When you get to level 2, on the Genesis, you had like this chase level where you were side-scrolling running down a hill from an avalanche, and you had to jump over obstacles or dodge obstacles. This was ridiculously hard, not because of a skill issue, but because you were so zoomed in that as soon as something showed up that you had to dodge on screen, your reaction time to jump over it was minuscule. It was a stupid small amount of time you had to react. You only had so many lives and then you had to start over. It was hard, but not due to skill, like I said. It was cheap hard. And that made it incredibly difficult. Most people, I would say, did not make it past that level, and that was like level 2. Now on the Sega CD, when you get to that level, it's still a chase level. You're running from an avalanche again, but now the perspective has changed from side-scrolling to kind of a 3D traveling down a hill. And now you're on a snowboard for some reason. I don't know why, but you're on a snowboard. It's much faster. You do have a bit more margin for error with the Sega CD version. It is much better looking. It's more entertaining. On this Genesis version, you hit something, you're screwed, you're done. But on the Sega CD version, you have a few stumbles you can make and try and make up some ground to get away from it because you can speed up and slow down. But the sheer amount of things it throws at you is so ridiculous. I guess it's a bit more of a skill thing at that point, but the difficulty is so damn high. It's not like Dark Souls where it's like, oh yeah, it's really difficult, but you know, you get good and it's really rewarding. No, it's not getting good. It's just chance and a whole lot of memorization because things come at you so fast and so much, and the controls and the game itself just don't go very well with it. So yeah, that tanked it for most people. Much like this Genesis version, a lot of people just didn't make it past that level. Is the game as bad as people say it is? No, I mean, those levels they're not good. They're so unbearable and frustrating that there's just no fun to be had there really. And that's a shame with the Sega CD version because the level design and everything is actually kind of cool. If they had just taken out some of the stuff they're throwing at you, made it a little bit tighter, it would have been a decent game at that point. But no, they didn't. They just made it harder. And to make things worse, by the way, they made it longer, like a lot longer. You think you're coming up on the end at one point, and it's like the midway point. And it is stupid hard. But yeah, Cliffhanger, I would not get this game unless you're just hell-bent on collecting for Sega CD and you just want everything. This game's not really worth playing. If you're like emulating or something and it's on there, it's free, yeah, give it a shot and you see what I'm talking about. But yeah, Cliffhanger had potential, but you kind of squandered it. All right, so next up is another game that, much like Cliffhanger, is based on a movie. Also has some FMV from said movie in it, but it is not an FMV game. It is a side-scroller as well. And also, not a good start to this video where I'm trying to convince you that the Sega CD is a good console, and that would be Bram Stoker's Dracula, based on the 1992 movie, I think it's 1992, by Francis Ford Coppola. Fantastic movie, visual style unlike anything you've ever seen. The making of that movie, by the way, is something really interesting to check out if you're into filmmaking. It has digitized, or at least looks like digitized graphics, kind of like a Mortal Kombat, like real people put in there and they move around. It's a good looking game for the time. I mean, it's not like the best looking game ever, but it has a very interesting look, much like the movie it's based on. But this game sucks, like a lot. I remember renting this as a kid and really looking forward to it because I enjoyed the movie and it just looked really good. It had great presentation and I was really hyped for it, and I got it. I remember renting it when I was spending the night with my older sister one night, and I was so disappointed. You play as Keanu Reeves' character and it's a side scroller. Everything that comes at you from the very first level and the smallest, like the bats, they're actually the most annoying. It's so difficult to hit, and it's not like a skill thing, much like Cliffhanger. It's just poorly made. So you will get like ravaged by like birds and bats, the most basic ass enemies in the game, because you just have a hard time hitting them. And your moveset is so janky and the controls are so sluggish, and there's like this huge input delay. And then you get to the platforming sections. The very first one, you have to like jump across these holes. It's very basic platforming. Jump across like some gaps in the ground. And you will die. I guarantee you're gonna die right there, multiple times. It's just judging where you need to jump from and land is just stupid in the game. I mean, the most basic is, this is the first level we're talking about, and it's just terrible. Now, I will, like Cliffhanger a minute ago, that one had some redeeming qualities. I could be like, it's got some good parts of the game, but you know, this thing ruins it. No, this game ruins it. This game is just not good. I've not ever made it very far into it. I'm sure there's somebody out there who loves this game, and bless you, I'm happy that you do. And that person will probably say, oh, if you make it to level 3, that's when the game really takes off. Yeah, well, you gotta make it to level 3. And this game is so frustratingly bad that I never did. Well, probably to level 3, but you know, I didn't make it very far into it, and I don't have any interest to make it far into it. But I own it. Anyway, okay, third time's the charm, and now we have a game that is, or at least in some circles, can be classified as a good game on the Sega CD, and it is our first FMV game. So when I say good game, your affinity for FMV games must be taken into consideration. I would like, on a side note before we get to this game, concerning FMVs, I would like to say, everyone there, if you have a preconceived notion of what FMV games are or their quality, be it that you've played them in the past and it didn't do it for you, or that you've never played them and you just heard how terrible they are, give them a chance. I'm gonna talk about a couple in this video that I think are worth giving a chance and going into with an open mind and understanding what they are. That is a big part about FMVs. You need to understand what the game is. Don't go into it expecting a different type of game. And that's any game, but I think FMVs, no one knew what to expect going into them, so they were pulling from some previous knowledge of other games, and they went in expecting something more like that, and this was a totally all new medium. They're more of an experience, interactive experiences. Look at them that way, and I think that that could change your perspective, and perspective is everything. So anyway, our first FMV game, our first, at least not bad game on the system, and that would be Double Switch. Yes, the spiritual successor to the granddaddy of all FMVs, Night Trap. Double Switch was not a sequel to Night Trap, but it was kind of a sequel in spirit. It's pretty much the same game. They added a few things to it, like gameplay-wise, but a whole different story, characters, vibe, and everything. If Night Trap was 80s cheese, Double Switch is 90s cheese. That aspect of Double Switch, the actual story, the characters, the video, all that, I really like. Now, the production values here are leagues above what Night Trap was. It's still corny, and it knows it's corny, but there's a but, because there's always a but. The gameplay is not as good, even though they added more gameplay and made it more like a game. Now, these games, you essentially trigger traps, very much like Night Trap. You have certain cameras set up in different rooms around an area. This time it's a hotel, and people, when the bad guys pass these at certain times in the game, you trigger a trap, you catch them, and that's how you make points. If you let enough get away, or if you let certain ones get away that will like cut off your power and stuff like that, then the game ends. It's a managing where you are, who you're catching at what times, and also watching the story, because you can't just stay in one room and watch that story unfold. If you're wanting to actually play the game and be successful, you have to bounce around a lot. There's a lot of that bouncing around. And that worked in Night Trap, but here they've added like these other gameplay elements, like you have to prime a trap and then set it off. There's multiple traps in each room, and you have to select that particular trap in order to set it. It's been a while since I played Double Switch, but it's things like that, all these like little details, which I get because people complain that, hey, Night Trap's not a lot of gameplay. You just kind of go into a room and spam the button until something, you know, the bad guy goes over it. They tried to alleviate that complaint here by adding more gameplay to it, and it kind of ruined the experience. Night Trap was already a challenge to manage the watching of the story and catching the augurs, the bad guys in that game. This one is a challenge. It's like you can't even watch the story because you're so concerned about these other management things going on, and they're just not really that fun. Not like Night Trap. Night Trap had a basicness to it that just worked and flowed. This one, it's a bit more difficult. It's not a terrible game. It's still a fun game, but it's not as fun. It seems like a bit more work, not in like the satisfying gameplay type of way. But Double Switch, yeah, it sounds like I'm ragging on it. No, it is a good time. It's got Corey Haim in it, R.I.P., and some other people that you've seen in movies, B-movies and stuff like that. It's a good time. The story, the cheesiness, the presentation is great. I have a really good time with this game, but when compared to Night Trap, not quite. But yeah, check out Double Switch. I wouldn't make this your first FMV game though. check out one of the other ones we're going to talk about in a little bit. But if you end up enjoying FMV games after you check them out, then Double Switch is worth checking out. The story and presentation especially make this worth spending the time with to get through. Now next on the list is another FMV games. There's going to be a lot of those today. And this is actually another game that's really good, but I think got kind of drugged down by another game that has an extremely similar title, and that would be Dracula Unleashed. Not to be confused with Bram Stoker's Dracula that we talked about a moment ago. Now, Dracula Unleashed is a traditional FMV game. You watch video and you go around. It's very much like a Sherlock Holmes consulting detective, but good. If you know what that is. If you don't, we're gonna get to that in a few minutes. You go to different places in London during this time period, and when you go there, if you go there at the right time or certain times, you get different videos. And from those videos, you gain items, or you may need certain items in your inventory or equipped when you do these videos to get different outcomes and things of that nature. This is essentially a sequel to Bram Stoker's Dracula, not the game Bram Stoker's Dracula, but the book. It takes place after the events of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it's about the brother of one of the main characters and how that character has died, and the brother comes to London searching for his killer or what happened to him or whatever, meets a woman, finds purpose in life, and then Dracula shows up. It's a really neat game. This game suffers, and I use the term suffers lightly, from something that a lot of games in general, especially older games, but Sega CD games especially, has an issue, and the issue is actually more with us, the gamers, and that is that you need to read the manual to this game. If you don't read the manual to this game, you're gonna just not know what the hell to do. Because the manual tells you, the game doesn't tell you, but the manual tells you very specifically what you're supposed to do and how the game is played. This is a new medium. FMV games are different from any other type of game as far as the way that you play them. And this game actually does have some more gameplay elements, like adventure game. It's very much more akin to an adventure game than something like a Night Trap or something like that. You're going and getting items, having them in your inventory at the right time, getting the right item at the right place at the right time, etc., finding them in the environment, things like that. If you don't know that, if you don't know how the game operates and how it works, which the manual does tell you, you're gonna be lost. I played this game years ago and I didn't like it because I didn't understand how to play it. And the game gives you no direction whatsoever. It's not like new games where they have like tutorial levels and all that. There's no tutorial level. There's an opening cinematic and then you're in it. You have to read the manual to understand little things. And that's the crazy thing with a lot of these Sega CD games. It's just little things that you need to know that totally change the experience. Once I did that, I took the time to sit down, it's not like a big read or anything, and just read and understand how this game works and how to play it. I had such a good time with it. This is such an awesome game with a great presentation, man. And it is a little corny, a little cheesy, yeah, but it's not like Night Trap cheesy. It's just really fun, and it's a really good time. I had a really good time playing it, and you can get different outcomes depending on how you play the game. It's got multiple endings, things of that nature. It's just a really solid game, but you gotta know how to play it. So you gotta read that manual. If you get like a loose copy, then go online and read a digital manual or look up how to play the game at least. And it is a really, really fun game, and fun in the way of, you know, it's a fun experience rather, I should say. It is less of a game and more of an experience, but it's a really good time and is very satisfying, and I absolutely recommend checking this one out. I think it got dragged down by having that Dracula name around the same time as Bram Stoker's Dracula, and the fact that it's just hard to get into if you don't read the freaking manual. A lot of people nowadays don't read manuals because some people, a lot, especially younger crowds, don't know what the hell a manual is. Games don't have those anymore, but back in the day we had these little books that we had to read sometimes to understand how to play the game, and Sega CD games were especially notorious for that. But Dracula Unleashed, worth it, man. Check that one out. It's a good time. And we have yet another FMV, kinda. I get it's technically an FMV. I don't know if it doesn't fall into the same category as FMVs though, in my opinion, with a traditional FMV, but technically it is. And I'm talking about Dragon's Lair. Now, we're gonna get into all that, what I think, oh, my case is cracked. But we're gonna talk about like what classification this falls into, because I've got a few other games that are similar to this, and if it is or is not an FMV. But Dragon's Lair is one of the few games out there that exists that if it is on a platform, if they make it, I'm gonna buy it. There's a couple of those out there. Your Flashback, Mortal Kombat, things like that. If it's available, I don't care if I own 25 versions of it on other consoles or systems or Steam or whatever. If it's available, I'm gonna buy it because I love me some Dragon's Lair. Dragon's Lair is animated. It's Don Bluth. If you know who Don Bluth is, he made things like Secret of NIMH. More recently-ish, Titan AE, which was kind of frowned upon, but I thought it was pretty cool, especially that opening scene. Damn, that's awesome. He has made tons of great animations back in the day. Very well known and famous for that. This is his company and it's a Don Bluth game. He animated this, or at least his company did. You're watching a cartoon and each scene you'll get a prompt, like usually a little flash to one side or the other as the action's happening, and you have to hit left, right, up, or down, or the action button. That's it. It was an arcade game originally as a laser disc. It blew everybody away in the arcades. I remember seeing this thing in the arcade. It cost like $1 or $2. I remember that to play. This is back in the day when 25 cents, that's what it cost to play everything. But Dragon's Lair cost $1. And it was actual video, and everybody was like, oh my God, look how good that looks. Because it did, and it still does. You essentially just pick the right direction. If you don't get it, you die. And then you do it all over again. You do that repeatedly. It's more repetition than anything. This is a pretty good version of the game. Now, in 2024, you can find better versions for a lot cheaper, honestly. You can find more updated versions digitally on Steam, on probably every console available. I think they even have it on DVD. They do, absolutely, because I've got that somewhere. But there's other higher quality, better looking versions. This isn't a bad looking version, but it is hindered a bit by the Sega CD's limited color palette. It looks pretty good, but you just gotta know what you're playing on it. One thing I do like about this version that some versions, and it's real hit or miss, are missing is there are versions out there that are missing the prompts. I don't know why that is. And when I say prompt, it's just like a quick flash. These animated games like this that play like this, which there's a few that we're gonna get to, if you're supposed to go left, like you'll get like a quick little flash at the time that you're supposed to do it. And it's quick. You don't have a lot of time to make that input. It never feels like, you know, like I was talking about Cliffhanger, how it was so quick it's unfair. It never feels like that. You're gonna die, and you gotta kind of have an idea that it's coming up and what you're gonna do, but it's quick enough and you got just enough time to do it. It does feel somewhat skill-based. Dragon's Lair is a good time. It's a great animation to watch. If you watch it from beginning to end, the actual movie, it's like 20-something minutes, that's it. So it's not a very long game if you play it from beginning to end, but I'm sure somebody out there can one credit this game, but I've never done that. Most people are not gonna finish this in 20 minutes, but yeah, Dragon's Lair, it's a good time. It's quite the experience. I think most people are aware of Dragon's Lair. It's very simple, so it's kind of a chill game, but at the same time not. It can be stressful, but yeah, it's a good time. I think it's worth giving a shot and playing, but maybe on a more modern console, just be sure you get one with those prompts, because without those prompts, it is kind of like, you're like, well, I gotta just play it until I find that direction I'm supposed to go. That's not fun. You should have something giving you an idea of what direction or input you're supposed to give. Dragon's Lair Sega CD, really solid version of the game, especially for 1990, whatever it came out. Okay, so this next one is very timely and topical for this point in time in 2024, and it's another movie-based game, kind of. That would be Dune. Dune, the game, based on not Denis Villeneuve's Dune from 2020 or 2021 and the very recently amazing Dune Part 2. No, based on Dune, the 1984 movie, which I grew up with that. If you don't know of that movie, I love that movie. Fully acknowledge it's not a good movie though. I love Dune too, the book. Aesthetically, it is based on the 1984 movie, but narratively, which they're both based on the Dune books, of course, this is more based around the Dune books. It's an RTS, more or less. It's not an FMV game. It's got FMV in it from the movie, but this is not an FMV game. This is an RTS with resource management aspects to it. One of the Dune games was the first RTS. It's like the RTS that started RTS, the RTS genre. It may be this one. It might be, I'm not sure. I actually have played very little of this game. What I played of it, I remember thinking it was pretty cool. I liked, but I have not gotten real deep into Dune. I do plan on eventually getting to it. I love the Dune books. I love the Dune movies, even the 84 one that this aesthetically is based on. So I can't really say if this is good. Like I said, my limited amount of time I spent with it, it was entertaining. I was liking what I was seeing. It's very story-based. The gameplay itself is actual RTS, but the story is very deep, much like Dune is. So if you're a Dune fan or an RTS fan, this is, from what I understand, it's a really good game. It's really worth checking out, I think. So now we have our first pack-in title for the Sega CD. Now this one, I think, was the pack-in for the Model 1 Sega CD, if I remember correctly. The Model 1 had multiple pack-ins, by the way. They gave you, I mean, it cost a lot. That thing was like $400, I think, brand new. And they gave you multiple discs and games. You know what? No, I think this is actually the Model 2 because of this right here. We'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, this is 2 games in 1 case. And we have, first of all, Ecco The Dalphin on the Sega CD. Now, you can get a long box version of this as well. This is the pack-in title version that I have here. This is essentially the Sega Genesis version of the game with better sound. They did this with a lot of games. They would take the Genesis version and put it on the Sega CD and just give it Redbook audio sound, so it had CD quality sound and less bit chiptunes and stuff like that, and more actual music. And that is what, if I remember correctly, that's what this one does. I don't think it added anything like gameplay wise or levels or anything. I don't think there's anything added to this game, if I remember correctly. It's just the audio. That being said, Ecco the Dalphin's a fun game. It's also a unique experience. There's not a lot of games like Ecco the Dalphin. You're a friggin' dolphin, and all the other dolphins, or most of the other dolphins in the sea life, have been sucked up into the sky at the beginning of the game by some unknown force, and it's up to you to figure out what's going on. And you swim around and you find these big crystals that talk to you. You talk to other dolphins, you battle some sharks and jellyfish and stuff, and it's like a relaxing, stressful game, if that makes sense. Most of it is pretty relaxing and kind of chill and interesting and fun. It's got some really chill music that'll just kind of put you in a zen state. But there are moments, like when in the cave systems, when you're looking for air, that are really stressful. Like, because you're a dolphin, so you got to breathe. You got to come to the surface every now and then. You have an air level or air meter. It's pretty liberal, but still, when you're in those caves and you can't find it, it starts to get a bit stressful at those times. But most of the game is pretty chill and relaxed until it's not. Absolutely worth checking out if you like, 16-bit era games. This is a very unique one that is worth checking out. Had a sequel and a branch off, a kid's version. But yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. And the Sega CD version, I guess technically is the best version of it because it has better sound. Now, on the flip side of that, and you got this a lot with Sega CD, they would give you like this double thing and have a game here and then a game on the other side. As you see, we have 2 of them here. Now, this is one that I have 2 of, kind of. There were 2 variations of this. This is the Sega Classics Arcade Collection. This came with both models of the Sega CD, but in 2 variations. The only difference is this version has 5 games and the previous version had 4 games. That's how I know that this is a Model 2, because the Model 2 one had the 5 games, Model 1 had 4 games. This has Streets of Rage, Revenge of Shinobi, Columns, Golden Axe, and Super Monaco GP. Super Monaco GP was the new game that they added to this. All of these games are really solid. The best of all would probably be between Streets of Rage, Revenge of Shinobi, and Super Monaco GP. Golden Axe, good time. Columns, good time. It's essentially a Tetris knockoff, but it kind of has its own thing. Still a fun game. All these games are very solid. There's not a bad game here. Most people would probably say Columns is the least of all, but still, I think Columns is pretty fun. Streets of Rage, this version of Streets of Rage is the best version. It has, much like Ecco, it has the better sound, but it's essentially the Genesis version. But the audio is better there. Golden Axe, same situation, better sound, same game, better sound. However, they did, if I remember correctly, take away multiplayer for some reason. Golden Axe is a very multiplayer-centric or focused game, like for 2 players or more in the arcade. But you can't play 2-player. I don't know why. I have no idea why that is, but this version is 1-player only. So if you are interested in playing multiplayer Golden Axe, this is not the best version. If you are only interested in single player, then this is the best version. It has the best sound. Super Monaco GP, I really don't know if they've made any differences or any changes to it, if it has better sound or not, but it's just a fun game. Super Monaco GP is a game that I never expected to like. I ended up with it when I was a kid on my Genesis, and I played the ever-living crap out of it. It's just really fun, and it still is. I popped it in not long ago when I got this version of it, because I had always had the 4-game version, so I got this one. I was like, oh, Super Monaco GP. I tried it out. it's still really fun. It's one of those games that you just like, oh, I'll play for a couple of minutes and you just waste the hours away, or at least a little while away. Columns, solid puzzle game, pretty chill, very Tetris-esque, but instead of like straight lines across, you're doing all different kinds of, you're matching shapes and stuff. And Revenge of Shinobi. Now, Revenge of Shinobi has a checkered past. Look that up for like the Genesis version. There's like a whole bunch of different versions of that game because of all this copyrighted stuff that Sega put in it, like Rambo, Terminator, Godzilla, Spider-Man, Batman. There's all kinds of like copyright IP in the game. It's really bizarre. They have nothing to do with Shinobi. They're just there. When it came out, it was all there, and then different versions of the game came out, or iterations as they continued to print it. They took stuff away until now. I think if you get like a modern like classic collection of it, none of the stuff's there. This version is somewhere in between. Some of the stuff is there, some of it's not. I'm not sure which revision it is, but it's not the totally neutered version. It's still got, I think, Batman's in it, Godzilla's in it, the Rambo and Terminator, Spider-Man. There is like at least one or two of the things that have been taken out, but it's kind of like an in-between where some of it's there, some of it's not. But yeah, good version of Revenge of Shinobi. Revenge of Shinobi's a fun game. My favorite out of all these, probably Streets of Rage. Love Streets of Rage, except for the twins battle. If you know, you know. If you played that, I hate them women. But yeah, fun games, definitely worth having in your collection if you have a Sega CD. Good times all around. These are all games that you're kind of like, oh, I don't know if I really want to play that, but then you sit down and start playing them, and you just play the hours away. Absolutely fantastic collection right here. So if you got a Sega CD, must own. And that brings us to our next game, which is another good game, and that would be the sequel to one of the last games we talked about, Ecco The Dalphin, The Tides of Time, or just Ecco The Tides of Time. This is the sequel to the first Ecco the Dolphin. It was first on the Genesis, much like the original Ecco the Dolphin was, and much like the original Ecco the Dolphin on Sega CD, it's essentially the same game, just with Red Book audio, better CD sound, better music and sound effects and stuff like that. It adds some CGI, very rude CGI cutscenes, but beyond that, and the music, it's the same game as the Genesis. Like gameplay wise and everything, it's exactly the same. I don't think it looks any better or anything like that. Ecco was already a pretty game, a good looking game, so it didn't really need a huge upgrade. Not a lot to say about Ecco, pretty much the same stuff I said about the other one. This one is a good game, but it's not as like wow and fresh as the original because it is more or less just very similar to the original. It's still a solid game. If you love the original, you're gonna love this. But if you've experienced the original, you're not gonna be as blown away and as like awe-inspired as you were by the first one, by this one, because it is kind of a lot of the same. But not in a bad way the same, just more of a good thing, if you will. But really solid game. The best version and best way to play it is on the Sega CD, so if you enjoy Ecco, then check this one out. And there's also the Genesis titles. If you don't have a Sega CD, you can absolutely experience these games on the Genesis, and you're not missing much. There's also Ecco Junior, by the way. I know we're talking Sega CD, but if you have kids, Ecco Junior on the Genesis is like a, I hate to use the term dumbed down, it's a pared down, easy to get into version of Ecco made specifically for young kids. And having young kids myself, I've actually found that they do enjoy that game. It's very simple in what they're supposed to do. So if you have young kids and they kind of see you playing games, they're like, hey, I want to play, but they have a hard time with all the controls, and modern controllers have like 1100 buttons on the controller and all kinds of advanced things. Ecco Junior, good one. But yeah, Ecco the Dolphin, Tides of Time, or Ecco Tides of Time, solid game. Now this one, I am conflicted on. Because yeah, I love this game right here. It has a Genesis version. This is actually a sequel to the Genesis version of this game of the same name, by the way. I'm talking about Eternal Champions. The Genesis and Sega CD version are just referred to as Eternal Champions, but the Sega CD version is actually called Eternal Champions Challenge from the Dark Side. It has a subtitle. Very few people ever use that. This is, in fact, a sequel to the original Eternal Champions on the Genesis. It has a lot more of everything. More characters, more moves, better sound all around. It's a 2D fighter in the vein of like a Street Fighter or something like that. It has Street Fighter fighting mechanics as far as like how you do the special moves and things like that. But it throws in some Mortal Kombat because it is ridiculously gory too. But not gory like in that dumb way that a lot of MK clones were back in the day, like Katsumi Ninja and stuff like that. It's actually a good fighting game, but man, it is an unrelenting, unforgiving fighting game. This is a fighting game for fighting game enthusiasts. This game's not easy, like at all. It is hard. The original Genesis version, I don't remember being as hard. The Sega CD version is hard as hell. Like you are not going to casually play Eternal Champions. And I think that is one of the reasons that it didn't fare as well, because it has a hard time appealing to that casual audience. It is only for the hardcore, but people that know Eternal Champions, fighting game fans that have more knowledge of the genre, they love Eternal Champions. Eternal Champions is really good, really awesome, very nuanced. Now, the Sega CD version, or sequel rather, has a lot of like CGI cutscenes, fatalities, CGI fatalities, tons of fatalities, all kinds of stuff, like cool things they added to it. There's all kinds of secrets in this game, like tons of secrets that they've added in that just really elevate this game above others. But like I said, it is hard. It is unforgiving, but much like in that kind of like Souls-like type of experience, if you stick with it and you get good, then this is a very satisfying experience. I'm surprised this game didn't take off more within the fighting community. Your Street Fighters, your Mortal Kombats, they can appeal to like your casual audience. They can get in there and have a good time with it, but they have more nuance to them, the later Mortal Kombats at least, to where, you know, enthusiasts can get hardcore and just like really play with the combo systems and juggles and things like that. Eternal Champions, screw all that normie stuff, if you will. This is for the hardcore and the hardcore only. It's a fantastic game, but man, be prepared when you get into this one. It is really worth it. If fighting games are not your thing, like you don't want to like pick Chun-Li in Street Fighter and just spam the high kick button or low kick button. If you actually want, you get into the minutia of fighting games and hitboxes, all the little details that other people don't even know anything about, this is not for you. If that does sound like something you're into, then Eternal Champions is a dream, and this is a fantastic game for its niche audience. I mean, look at the manual for this thing. Holy crap, it is like a novel. That is, you can't see it from there, I'm sure, but this thing is thick. How many pages is this? 70 pages. A 70-page manual from the 90s for a video game? This is ridiculous. This thing's got some real weight to it. That tells you how in-depth this game is from just having such a thick manual. Jesus, I didn't realize how thick that was. But yeah, it's a great game. Check it out if you're into fighting games. Like, really into fighting games. And so it's all led to here. One of my favorite games, not only on the Sega CD itself, but just in general. One of my all-time favorites. It's gotta be one of the most completed games I've ever played. I go back and play it every couple of years and enjoy it just as much every single time. And this is the premiere version of said game. It's on a ton of platforms, and I own it on a lot of platforms. And I am, of course, talking about Flashback, The Quest for Identity. This is my jam. This is my game. It's a side-scrolling, platforming, story-driven or narratively driven. I love it. It's sci-fi. I love this game. I love it, love it, love it, love it. Everything about it. They remade it in 2012, I think. I think Ubisoft put not a remaster, it was like a full-on remake of it. Didn't love that version. I didn't hate it as much as some people because I have such an affinity for Flashback, but it didn't touch the original. They should have just left the gameplay alone and put a prettier coat of paint on it. That's all we wanted. That's all we wanted. We didn't need all that other stuff you added. But we're talking about Flashback on the Sega CD, and this is the best version. They updated everything at least a little bit. Now the gameplay is untouched from the Genesis version and the SNES version and the Jaguar version and the 3DO version and the CDI version. There's a version of Flashback on everything. Gameplay is fairly untouched, but graphically it has more stuff going on screen, has better sound, has better cutscenes. This is just the premiere version, and it's fantastic. I love it. I would have originally played this game probably circa 1993, so I would have been about 13 or 14 years old, and it was perfect for me. This was the most narratively driven graphically narratively driven game I had ever played at the time. Yes, there were PC games I played that were very narratively driven, but this one had the whole package. It had the graphics, the gameplay, and the narrative, and it was like playing a movie. Not necessarily the way you watch it, but the story was very sci-fi and involved, and that's really my world right there. So this game just really spoke to me, and still does till this day. They did release a sequel in the end of 2023, and yeah, it's not good. It's not a very good game. It's broken. The gameplay-wise, it's okay-ish, but it does not stand up to the OG Flashback. Flashback is, if I had to recommend any game on the Sega CD, Flashback is the one. But I recommend it on any platform. It's pretty good on all platforms. Each one has its own little quirks, but it's just a fantastic game. I love this game so much. Looking at the case right now makes me want to go play it right now. This game, I played it back in the day and it just stuck with me, and I kept coming back to it on all kinds of different platforms. Fantastic game all around. Yes, Flashback is just amazing. Check out Flashback as soon as you possibly can. So back to some FMV goodness. We have our next FMV game, and one of the more popular or well-known FMV games that has actually been remade as well in recent years, and that will be Ground Zero Texas, which is not on, it's a shooter. It's not on rails because you don't really move, but you just kind of go from like location to location and shoot bad guys, then watch a video, go to another location, shoot bad guys, watch a video. It's a very simple game. There's like a handful of little things where you have to like be in a certain spot to collect a bit of information or get like a key or something like that. But beyond that, it is Night Trap in that way that you have like different camera views of different parts of this town, and aliens have invaded the town. It's super cheesy. I love it. And you watch a video, and then you have a section where some bad guys pop out, very like Lethal Enforcers kind of way. They pop out, you shoot them, and they like in slow-mo. It's all FMV. It's got a good presentation. It knows what it is. It's a cheesy early 90s, has like a Tremors kind of vibe going for it in Texas. It's a good time. I mean, it's not groundbreaking in any way, really. Go into it knowing what you're getting, kind of like sci-fi movie, like sci-fi channel movie, acting and stuff and effects, and it's a good time. I played this version too, but I played the updated version. It is a superior version. It looks better. It has easier to maneuver around and navigate rather. So I would suggest maybe playing that version unless you really want to be a purist. I enjoy playing the Sega CD versions of some of these games that have new versions, even though the Sega CD versions are not comparable, like the new versions are better. I still enjoy the old versions sometimes, but admittedly, the new version is more readily available, more accessible, and it's worth playing. Now, I will say the one thing about Ground Zero Texas, it has a few spots. The game will let you progress beyond where you're supposed to have like a key or know some bit of information in order to progress and finish the game. The game will let you continue playing on even if you don't have that. It is very old school in that way. It's not a lot of spots, but it is a few, and it will let you continue on until you get damn near close to the end of the game and you're like, I don't have that thing I needed, and you gotta go way back, like start at a way back into an earlier level in order to get that information or that key or whatever it is, I can't remember specifically, that you need. That happened a couple of times with this. It's not a lot of spots, it's only like one or two, but it does include that. Now, games back in the day used to do that. That was just something that they did. Especially like on the PC and stuff like that, there were quite a few games that did that. Phantasmagoria comes to mind, specifically. I remember getting to the very end of that game and not being able to, I did eventually beat it, but not being able to beat the game because I was missing like one stupid little thing that you had to have, and you had to go way back to get it. This game does do that in one part. Night Trap does that too with the changing of the color code, but it will only let you go so far. Like what happens is you can't trap the augurs, the bad guys anymore, and you'll rack up, your points will go way down and the game will end. Ground Zero Texas does not do that. It just gets to that part where you're stonewalled and you just can't go any further. So, but yeah, beyond that, and it's not like, like I said, it's only a handful of places. Beyond that though, Ground Zero Texas, good, cheesy FMV time. And it does what it does, it knows what it is, and it does it well. Now we got a game that I really haven't played much, haven't put much time into. I have a very limited knowledge of this game. It is based on a existing IP and a movie, a very popular movie. I've heard a lot of conflicting things about this game, whether it is good or not. I've heard some people say it's awful, and then others say it's good. We're talking about Jurassic Park on the Sega CD. Everything had a Jurassic Park game. There were multiple Genesis SNES games, but this is a situation where the Genesis version of the game is not the same as the Sega CD game. This is a completely different game. They're not even the same type of game. The Genesis was a 2D platformer, and this it's more like an adventure game from what I could tell. Very Myst and Seventh Guest. Some people classify it as FMV. It's not FMV. It has some full motion video moments, but I wouldn't classify this as an FMV from what I've played and what I've seen. You go around just the park, the island, to different facilities, and like when you pick where you want to go, it kind of like moves. You're not moving it, you just pick where you want to go, and it does kind of like have a fluid movement to it, but then it goes to like a static image of like the room. I think you might be able to move around the room like that, but all it is, your movements, you're not actually moving. You pick where to go, it moves, and then you can pick stuff in the static image in that area. You know, get items you may need or some information, see like a little cutscene. And from what I remember, it wasn't really cutscenes, it was more like informational terminals and stuff like that. I haven't played this game very much. I bought it because I like Jurassic Park and it looked like an interesting game, but I haven't really put much time into it, so I can't really give a recommendation or not. So anybody out there who's played Jurassic Park on the Sega CD, how is it? And I guess if I get in the comments, we'll find out how divisive this game is, because I've heard, like I said, some people love it, some people hate it, but you know, from what I've played, it seems interesting. I'm interested to play more, I'll say that much. Like I said, I think it's more like Seventh Guest Myst kind of gameplay. So if that's your jam, then you might like Jurassic Park on the Sega CD. Okay, so this is one that is interesting on a few different levels. It's an FMV game, but it's also a shooter, very much in the vein of Sewer Shark, which we will get to. But this one has some interesting little facts about it. Let's talk about it. Loadstar, The Legend of Tully Bodine. Okay, so this is one that a lot of people, I don't hear a lot of people talk about. It is a later release in the system's lifespan, if I remember correctly. 94, so yeah, this is a later release in the Sega CD's lifespan. Lots of FMV in it. The FMV you don't really interact with, you just watch. The actual gameplay is an on-rail shooter, very much in the vein of Sewer Shark. I would go as far as to call this a spiritual successor to Sewer Shark, in that way that it has FMV moments or cutscenes, and then you have the shooting sections where you're on rails, literally on rails in this. Now, this is a sci-fi trucker kind of situation, very much like the movie Space Truckers with Dennis Hopper and Steven Dorff, if you've ever seen that movie. If not, I understand. It's not very well known either. Great movie though, check it out. Super cheesy. It has fantastic production design or production values. Lots of famous people like Ned Beatty, he's in it. Lots of known actors, like not like name, you're not gonna know their names for the most part, but you'll be like, hey, it's that guy. Lots of that in this game. The video is really fun and I really dig it, but the gameplay, oh my God. I said it's a lot like Sewer Shark. I'm going to talk about Sewer Shark and how I feel about that game because I think it gets a bad rap. There's just missing things here that make it really difficult to play. Like the feedback of whether you're hitting what you're shooting or not, how to actually play the game, but that's not really on the game. I'll say that is just kind of how it is. This is one of those games you do need to read the manual to understand how to play it, because it's not as simple as just like pointing a cursor and shooting. You have to like pick which direction you're going. You're not really shooting, you're like doing like a shield or a jammer or something like that. I'm all okay with that. It's the feedback you get. If I remember correctly, was the biggest issue with this game. Like what direction to go, whether you picked the right direction, where you're supposed to go. These things are all like up in the air. Even if you've read the manual and you know what you're supposed to do, it tells you, oh, the game's like this. You're gonna be prompted to go this way or that way, and you do this to go this way or that way. But then when you play the game, you're not really prompted in a clear-cut way of which way you're supposed to go. You come up on like intersections and stuff while you're on these rails, and you have to pick to go left, right, up, down, whatever. It doesn't really tell you, not in a way that I could ever figure out. And then when you pick which direction you're going, it doesn't like confirm that you've picked that way, so you know to keep on like defending your ship, because you're defending your ship you're shooting at all these things or blocking, but then you have to, when you come up on these intersections, much like Sewer Shark, you have to pick that. It doesn't like confirm that for you. You don't know, what have I picked, have I not? Also, it uses the same button to, I think, shoot and turn. So you'll be shooting and you'll make a turn, you'll make a confirmation to turn, and you won't even know it until you turn. Like Sewer Shark did that, but it used a different button. You had a combination, I think, of the button and the direction. So you had to actually stop shooting, pick that, and then go back to shooting. That seems like more. It almost seems like, well, if you use the same button, that makes it a bit easier. No, it makes it a whole lot harder. So that unto itself, from what I remember, kind of ruins this experience. It is a game I really want to like. Like, I love the aesthetic, I love the world, I love the lore and everything that's going on in the game, the video portions of it, the story. It's so cheesy and so it's just great. The gameplay, though, mainly because of the control scheme, is just almost impossible. Now, would I recommend playing this? I mean, if you're really into like Sewer Shark and FMV games, I think it's worth checking out. I wouldn't spend a ton of money on it, but I think it is worth checking out. It is going up in value quite a bit, though. It's not like super expensive yet, but it's getting there for a complete in-box copy, by the way. Now, one interesting thing about this game, if you look in the instruction manual in the back at the credits, you may see a familiar name. There is a rather famous enigmatic person that worked for Rocket Science Games. Now, it wasn't this person's company. He was a programmer, I believe it says. I'm not going to look it up right now, but he did work on this game. Now, some people have falsely said that it was his game. No, it wasn't his game. He just worked on the game as a programmer of sorts. And that person would be a young Elon Musk. So yeah, this is the game that Elon Musk worked on. I get it. I see it. Absolutely seems like his kind of thing. I just wish they'd figured out that whole button turning thing. That just ruins it. What he had input on and what he didn't, I don't know. He's just a programmer from what I could tell, but he's not like the director or anything. But yeah, Elon Musk, it's the Elon Musk game. He worked on it as just a guy. Yeah, Loadstar, The Legend of Tully Bodine, such promise, such potential. I want to like this game so bad. But it's just, man, it's tough to get into. I go back to it every now and then to try and give it that chance, hoping that I'll just like hit that point to where it just clicks and like, oh, okay, now I get it. And it, you know, and it's happening for me and I enjoy the game and now I understand. No, it's just, it's not me, it's you. Check it out at your own risk, I guess. Now, while so far on this list, the games that I've said were good were more of my opinion, and overall, maybe that's not the opinion of everybody, except for maybe Dune. I think that one's pretty much seen as a pretty universally good game, but all the other games thus far been kind of like more of my personal opinion. This next one, though, is seen as pretty universally a great game, and it's kind of worth a fair amount as well now, and that would be Lunar 2 Eternal Blue. This is a JRPG in the most classic sense in the Lunar series. It's the only Lunar game I've ever played, and I'm not super familiar with the rest of the Lunar series. I know it's a very heralded, long-running series. It's a Working Designs game. I know Working Designs is seen as a great developer. It's a really cool JRPG. This is on the PlayStation as well. They have like an updated version on there that's a bit more modern, at least for that time in the later 90s. This version, this is a bit more of an older school JRPG than some more modern audiences might be used to. It has a lot of JRPG things that you would expect, but like its menu system and how you access things. The turn-based battles play out like current JRPGs do and always have, but the way you select everything and all that, it's a bit, some would call antiquated. It is, it's just older, but it's really cool. It is a really neat game that has a really cool story and an awesome soundtrack. This game is worth, last time I checked, I'll double check here, but it was like $400 or $500 now. I did not pay that for this, but it's a really cool game. Do I think that you should pay $400 or $500 for it? No, probably not. But I do think it's worth giving a shot, maybe on the PlayStation version, which that one's going on up in price as well, or even emulation. I'm not opposed to emulation because I understand not everybody wants to pay hundreds of dollars just to play one single game, especially when that game's 30 or 40 years old. It's just got really cool characters. It has anime cutscenes they made for it, and those are really cool. The game overall is just a really neat game, and it's absolutely worth checking out. If you're not a JRPG fan, well, obviously you probably won't enjoy it, but if you are a JRPG fan, I think you'll really like this. The soundtrack is what always stands out to me for Eternal Blue, and it is really cool. Like the overworld song that dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that was terrible, but I really, it never gets old. I mean, it is an older game. It's CD audio, but it is kind of the looped sounds or looped music, and it's just really cool. And the battle songs, the whole soundtrack is just really damn good in this game. Very memorable. But so is the story. JRPG graphics of the time. They're really good for the time, actually, but you know, they are that, if I remember correctly, kind of isometric, small characters look where you're moving around the overworld, and then when you go into battle, it's more 2D. It's like Final Fantasy, all the other JRPGs of the time. But yeah, it's a really cool game. If you're a JRPG fan, you will definitely find something in Lunar to Eternal Blue that you will enjoy. Sega CD version's pretty damn pricey though. And from a great game to an FMV again. And this is an FMV that I am newer to. I just got this in the past year or so, and I was not aware of this game when it first came out. I became aware of it because it is an FMV, and I seek out FMVs because I love them. And that is The Masked Rider, Kamen Rider Z-O, I don't know. Or maybe it's Kamen Rider Zo, The Masked Rider. I'm not sure, but it's The Masked Rider. And it's an FMV game that, from what I understand, there's a Japanese movie called Kamen Rider. That's a character over there that's really popular. And they took that movie, cut it up, added a few scenes here or there, and made it an FMV game. This is one of them FMV games where you're essentially just watching and picking left, right, up, down action. It's kind of like Dragon's Lair, if you will. It's like, it's in that way. But it's actually, instead of being a cartoon, it's actual live action footage. I mean, the gameplay is, like I said, it's Dragon's Lair, it's left, right, up, down, A, which one you're hitting when. It does a really good job of prompting you what to hit and when. This is probably one of the most clear-cut what you're supposed to hit when games out there. It's like QTE, the game. The whole game is just a big QTE. The movie that plays is really neat. It's very much in the vein of like a Power Rangers or the Guyver, if you know what that is. Really reminded me of The Guyver, if you've ever seen The Guyver. That was a Japanese-American team-up movie that they made back in the early 90s. Mark Hamill was in it, but it's based on a Japanese property. Really neat, but very distinct in its style. That's absolutely what Kamen Rider or Masked Rider comes across to me. That's how it spoke to me. If you're into those kind of like interactive movie experiences where you're just hitting left, right, up, down, and you like kind of that Japanese pseudo, you know, melodramatic, over the top and corny 1980s, 90s monster smash ups like Power Rangers-esque, I think you'll enjoy this. It's pretty cool. It's got good production values because it is based on a current and an existing movie, so everything in it looks real good. And it's, you know, for what it is, it's a pretty good time. It's fun. Price-wise, I'm not sure what it's going for, but this seems like a game that will go up in price to me. I feel like this game's gonna be worth a lot one day. It may not be right now. I think it's worth a decent amount. I feel like this is gonna be one that is gonna end up being worth a lot one day. I don't know, could be wrong. It could be worth like $2. And now another FMV. I said there would be a lot of them. We're only about halfway through here, and that would be Midnight Raiders. Okay, I gotta admit, I don't have a lot of exposure with this game. I did not play it back in the day. This is a game I got when I got back into collecting. I've actually had this game for a while. I can't remember much about it. From what I understand, it's very Tomcat Alley, except with helicopters. Kind of like Masked Rider. I think it's a little bit more involved than that, but you're more or less just picking an action when you're supposed to. I can't really say much about this. I don't want to comment too much because I can't even remember the little bit I did play. It is all, as it says here, it proclaims on the front, all live video action, air and ground battles. So yeah, I do remember that. You get out, you're not only in the helicopters, you're actually on the ground too. It's super corny and cheesy, very like 90s B-movie military, like Delta Force kind of thing. I know that was 80s, but that kind of thing. It's a Sega True Video Productions, like Tomcat Alley, Sewer Shark, those kind of, well, that was Digital Pictures, but that's what kind of game this is. I mean, it is what it is. You go into it understanding that you're not playing this really for the gameplay, you're playing this for the cheeso story and how over the top it is. And if you enjoy that, you'll probably enjoy this one. I can't say 100%, because like I said, I don't remember on playing it. I do plan on getting into it and playing it one day, hopefully soon. I'm looking at the box here, and it's kind of reinvigorating me. I mean, you got this guy on the back who's all like, ah, and like lots of explosions and people running around. I kind of want to play this now, so I might play this sooner than later now. Have you played Midnight Raiders? Midnight Raiders. What do you think? Is it good? Is it bad? You know, take into account what kind of game it is and what the kind of games I like. Will I enjoy this? Let me know. Okay, because it seems like I can't have a system, especially a system pre-1998 or even after that I don't have a copy of this game on, or at least a version or one of the games in this series. One of my all-time favorite series out there. I loved this series when it was an arcade series. Still love it till this day, but man, the original three were the ones that still to this day really speak to me, and that would be Mortal Kombat! Of course it is. I love Mortal Kombat. I probably own more copies of Mortal Kombat something than any other game. As far as series go, I'm sure I own more copies of Mortal Kombat something throughout this whole collection. If Mortal Kombat's on there, I'm gonna get it. With one caveat, this is the best version of the OG Mortal Kombat that you can play, at least of the time. Of course, they have updates now. As of 1990, whenever this came out, 94, as of 1994, this was the best version of the game you could get. It looked the best, it sounded the best, it played the best. One thing it does do, because it is disc-based, when you get to Shang Tsung, it loads whenever he changes, whenever he morphs, and that kind of does break up the gameplay a little bit. You have like a pause, and then it's not long. It's like maybe a second and a half, but it's enough to make you kind of, oh, that's not cool. And as an added bonus, it does include the super awesome and super 90s Mortal Kombat commercial from back in the day, where the whole Mortal Kombat thing started at the beginning of the game. So yeah, that's pretty cool. It's Mortal Kombat. You know it. I don't have to explain it. You either love it or you don't. Sega CD version, it's a great version. I really love it. It's on there, so I'm gonna buy it. And from one fighter to another, but one of a very, very different kind, cut from a very different cloth. We're talking FMV fighter. Yeah, they did that. And it was called Prize Fighter. And yeah, Prize Fighter is, it's very Tully Bodine in that way that I do like this game. I like the game to a degree, and I want to really love the game. But there is one very crucial thing that holds it back, much like with Tully Bodine or Loadstar. This is a boxing game. It's all 100% FMV, and you're boxing. You have like your little gloves up there, and you can actually pick. It's more gameplay than the other type of FMV games. You can pick which arm is punching when it punches. Your hands, your boxing gloves, are not FMV or full motion video. They're overlaid on there. It's from a first-person perspective. It's very Raging Bull. Saying that's its inspiration is a no-brainer. This is Raging Bull the game. And it's a bit cheesy, but not quite as cheesy as, say, something like Night Trap or Double Switch. It has its cheesy moments, but overall it plays it pseudo straight with a bit of cheese interwoven throughout. It looks great. Execution-wise, as far as like how it all comes together, like from the full motion video scenes to the full motion video fighting and all, works as well and works pretty good. The problem is with this game is knowing what punches to throw, how to throw them, and when to throw them. Prompts, once again, because it essentially is a game. It's masked, but it's essentially a game that you gotta hit the right button or button combination at the exact right moment to get the positive or negative reaction. It's like a very advanced Dragon's Lair, if you will. Except you don't die, like it gives you, you can miss some. You have like a life bar. The problem is it's not clear. It's not clear at all. And what prompts you do have, you can go into the options, I will say, and there is a way, I can't remember exactly how because it's been a while since I played it. You can get a visual aid, a prompt, but the margin for error is like Cliffhanger levels. There is no margin for error. It's like by the time it's popped up and told you what you need to do, it's too late. So that really makes it difficult. Now there is a way, and this is the only time I'll ever suggest this, there is a way to cheese the game. It's not cheating, but it's finding a fault in the game's logic and working around it. For the life of me, I can't remember what that is right now, but I do know that there's It goes along with that thing in the options I was talking about, that you set that up, and there's a way you can cheese the game and push yourself through the actual fight so you can see the story. And I'm gonna suggest you do that if you play this game, because the story and the video and all that is really entertaining. But the fighting part, I wanna like it. Like, everything to like it is there. It's just knowing what to do and when to do it. Without this way I'm talking about, it's a crapshoot. You're just like throwing punches and blocks and hoping for the best. And there's no real skill involved. There's so many of these games like that, like Loadstar. There's so many of those Sega CD games, the FMV games, that have such cool concepts, such cool video. There's so much about it you want to play. You want to continue on this journey with the game, but there was like this one broken thing that just ruins the experience and makes you just kind of like, it's not worth it. Prize Fighter is just about there. If it wasn't for this being able to cheese the game, I would say that this game would practically be unplayable, because you just never know. I mean, there's no skill whatsoever involved. If you like FMV games, this is definitely one worth checking out, because it has relevance and it is very unique. There's one more game that is from a first-person perspective, or two more. One's a fighting, one's a sports game, from a first-person perspective, that are similar to this one, but those three are very unique types of games and takes on the FMV genre. This is another one of the Sega True Video productions, by the way, kind of like Midnight Raiders was. So yeah, Prize Fighter ain't for everybody, but if you're a hardcore FMV Sega CD fan, worth checking out. If you're not that, watch a video on YouTube or something. Okay, so now this one right here is a fantastic game. We're going from a game that's not so hot to a great game. You see that a lot on the Sega CD. And this is an interesting genre because it's hard to pin down. And we've got a couple of games, a few games on the Sega CD that fall into this mysterious genre. And it's kind of a mashup of the era. And the game is Rise of the Dragon. Now, Rise of the Dragon is kind of a visual novel RPG adventure game. If that makes any sense. It's probably not really an RPG, honestly. It's probably more just a adventure game visual novel. It is a unique experience, and there's a couple of these types of experiences on the system, which we're going to talk about. One's extremely popular. You essentially are going from static shot to static shot, from place to place. So you're investigating a drug. It starts out as a drug that's killed a politician, I believe's daughter, and the drug turns people into like mutants, like crazed mutants. It's very cyberpunk, Blade Runner-esque. You're investigating what's going on there, and it takes off from there. Really interesting story. The gameplay is very basic as far as like, not basic, it's just very adventure game. You go to a static screen and you talk to people and you pick all the different options. The vast majority of this game is spent on static screens, picking things and hearing little blurbs about it, or taking something like an item that you'll need for later and talking to people. Most of it's talking to people, talking to randos around the place, going to the right place and talking to the right person at the right time. That aspect of it is kind of the RPG and adventure game crossover right there. Got some manual reading. You'll need to go through the manual to kind of get your bearings, because it's a very PC-centric game. I'm not 100% sure about Rise of the Dragon if it started its life on PC, but I would not be surprised if it did. It works on the console. It works well. You just gotta know how it works, how to play the game. So just give the manual a little flip. I don't necessarily mean the whole manual, just the part that tells you like the game mechanics. You learn those, then you can play it. It's got some really cool animated sections in it. It's got a lot of like still animation that they kind of do that motion comic thing where it is a still shot, but they move it and warp it and things like that. There's a bit of that in here, but there is some straight up animation too that's pretty cool. So just a really neat all around game, all about the story. This is all about the story. If you are a very narratively driven person, if you like deep narratives and like JRPGs or just RPGs in general have, then I think you will like Rise of the Dragon. It's very Blade Runner, cyberpunky. Not cyberpunk the game like 2077, but just cyberpunk the genre. It's very much that. But yeah, definitely Rise of the Dragon is absolutely worth checking out. It's a bit of a slow start, and it takes some getting used to how the game plays and getting, going back to an old way of playing games. But once you're there and get involved in it, it's one that's hard to put down once you really get into it. Definitely worth checking out. And here we are to what many see as the best game, or definitely one of the best games on the platform. And I find that really ironic due to what type of game it is. Now, this is technically an FMV game, It's animation, but it is technically full motion video. It's not live action video. And typically when we say full motion video, we liken that to live action video, you know, shot. This is actually animation. It's choose your own adventure, more or less. And that is Road Avenger. It's called something else in Japan. I can't remember. Japan and maybe Europe, it's called this. The whole thing is like an animated movie, and you're in this car and you pick left, right, brake, and boost, I believe it is. And you hit those, it pops up on the screen what you gotta hit, you hit it, and you see what happens. It's a lot more gameplay centric though, because it's not just like you hit it, watch a scene, then hit it again. No, it's like hit it, hit it, hit it, hit it. It's very QTE, very QTE. But this is a fun game. And what makes this game so fun is the visual representation. What you're seeing on screen is really cool. Like the animation itself, the movie within the game is really neat. And it's not super long either. It's got like a very basic yet cool story. You got married, and on your wedding day, I think it is, you're run off the road and your bride is killed. So then you become like the Road Avenger, and you get in your bitchin' enough changes to avoid copyright laws, Trans Am looking Mad Max-esque car, and take off in the city and the roads to avenge. You're the Road Avenger. It's really basic, but it's really fun. I think that is one of the things that these types of FMVs, when they got too complicated, that's when they kind of lost some of their charm, and you couldn't really pay attention to the full motion video aspect of the games because you were too inundated by all these gameplay mechanics. And it's crazy, I'm sitting here saying they should dumb down a game, but with these types of games, that's what works. You're here for the video, the movie that's playing, and I think finding that perfect balance of interaction versus inaction was tough for the Sega CD FMV game, or FMV games in general. But I think Road Avenger, much like a couple of others on the platform, did a really good job of that. It gives you just enough to where you feel like you're involved, you feel like you're doing something. There is a bit of a stress level. You can never quite put the controller down, but you're able to pay attention to what's going on screen as well. So it's really cool. Now this is not the original box to the game. It is the actual game, but it came in a paper box, a cardboard box, and they were notoriously, they fall apart. I mean, you can find them, there's some of them out there, but I don't have any of the paper box Sega CD games as of yet, because most of them were thrown away or just, destroyed. They just fell apart over time. They weren't very high quality. This is I made this box for the game because it was just a loose copy. But anyway, yeah, Road Avenger, absolutely. You got a Sega CD, Road Avenger is worth checking out. If you don't have a Sega CD and you like these types of games, Road Avenger is still really worth checking out. If you like anime, I think you'll like Road Avenger because it is more or less just an anime that you interact with. So it's a pretty cool game and absolutely worth your time. From one anime to another, we've got another one that is very similar to Road Avenger and your Dragon's Lairs and some of the other ones like that we've gone through thus far. This is an animated one. It is Revenge of the Ninja. It's also made by Renovation, who made Road Avenger. I did not play this when I was younger. I think I'd heard of it, but I was not aware of the game. I have not really played much of this game. I've played very little of it. It's QTE or very Dragon's Lair. You come into a scene, left, right, up, down, action. You do that until you win the scene. That's it. It's that simple. I do remember its reaction times were pretty tight. I will say that. I do recall that. But doable, very doable. It's pretty violent, not like insanely violent, but it is pretty violent, and it's very much in that violent anime way. But yeah, I can't really tell you too much about it except for it is just one of those types of games. If you like those Dragon's Lair-esque types of games, but with a more Eastern flair, if you will, this game is probably for you. What I played of it, I did enjoy. It was pretty cool. I just haven't sat down and played the rest of the way through, but I do think that this is one that I'm definitely going to sit down with. Renovation seems to do pretty good with these games. They seem to strike that balance of, interaction with the game, but still being able to pay attention to the video portions of the game. So this is another one of those that they did a really good job with. And here we are with one of the most notorious Sega CD games. It's a pack-in title. This is not the original box. And that would be Sewer Shark. Everybody's heard of Sewer Shark. It's synonymous with the Sega CD as Night Trap was. Unlike Night Trap, that's kind of found this love over the years, these people that have ended up really liking the game and having a fondness of it, Sewer Shark, for the most part, has not found that. People pretty much crap all over this game. The general consensus is it's not a good game, but it is. I think it is actually a pretty cool game. You want to play Sewer Shark? Read this. Read this. You need it. It will teach you what you need, because the game does not teach you what you need to know to play the game. And some might say, well, that's stupid. Why would a game not? We've already talked about it. That's just what games used to do back in the day. They were a little bit more hardcore. They expected you to read that booklet that they sent with it. Once you understand how to play Sewer Shark, I'm not saying Sewer Shark is the deepest game in the world. It's not. It's absolutely not. But it's a fun game. It's good enough. It's not like the best, but it is entertaining. I actually go back to it often. And granted, one of the things that make it entertaining is its off the flippin' rails story, and the performances. It is insane. The story in this game and the video representations are insane. Like, they half the time don't make sense, but don't make sense in like a good way. It's like they meant for it to be that way. It's crazy. I love that about it. I had a really good time just seeing what was gonna pop up next. I was playing through the shooting portions of the game, wanting to get to the next video because they're so crazy and over the top. I want to see what they're going to do. The game is basically an on-rail shooter, and the shooting part is fine. It works. You go around shooting radigators, scorpions, and bats. The bats are really annoying. Every time you shoot the gun, it uses up energy, and you have to manage how much you're shooting the gun. You have to kill a certain amount, but you don't want to use up all your energy. You have to make it to energy checkpoints and make sure you go through those so you re-energize your health and your energy of your ship. You also have to go left, right, up, down through the junctions. He will tell you 3 coordinates at the beginning of each little section, but the game does it just right. That sounds like a lot to like manage all at once while you're doing this, because it's a pretty fast game, but it does it just right. Like, it's never too much. You can be shooting and you can see it flashes when it's coming up on what direction you know is coming up, and if that's the next one in the sequence of turns you need to take, you stop shooting for a second, hold C, and hit that direction. And bam, there you go. And then you can just switch right back to shooting. That is literally a click, click, really quick thing. You don't really miss a beat. It works perfect. Why didn't Tully Bodine do this in Loadstar? Anyway, Sewer Shark, don't believe all the trash talk. It's not a bad game. Just know how to play the damn game. And I think that you can have a good time with it. If you don't like that cheesy corniness that I've been talking about with these videos, you're not gonna like any of the FMVs. That's the vibe they went for. So if you're not into that good, bad kind of film experience, you're probably not gonna like this. But if you are kind of like that over-the-top, machismo, stupid 90s B-movie sci-fi vibe, if you like that, you're gonna love it. Don't believe all the BS people talk about this game. It's a pretty good time. So our next pack-in title is the OG pack-in for the Sega CD. The Sega CD originally came with 2 of these little double pack-in games, and this is the games, but you also had a video and audio CD called Hot Hits, I think, or whatever it was. It was whatever. I don't have that one anymore, unfortunately. I do have the case somewhere. I don't have the actual disc anymore. This is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. It's in really bad shape. This is not the best FMV game. It's a lot like Dracula Unleashed. Is it Unleashed? Is that what it's called? Yeah, Dracula Unleashed. It's a lot like Dracula Unleashed. I wanted to say Untold, but that's a movie. Anyway, it's in that same vein, or I guess Dracula Unleashed is in the same vein of this. But Dracula Unleashed does a much better job. Consulting Detective, you watch full motion video. It's very small and very compressed. And then you go from place to place trying to solve the crime, picking out clues and details, talking to people, and then in the end you have to prove your case. It's okay. I mean, it's not even really okay. It's not that great. If you love FMVs like me, you could probably muscle through it, but you're not gonna be in love with it. I have a high threshold for FMVs, and this one really pushed my limits. I just didn't care for it. There's a second one. I've not played that one. I hear it's better. It was a showcase for the system because it was like, hey, look, real video in your game, and it came with it. But beyond that, beyond turning that on and showing it off, like my mom was like real big into like PBS and Masterpiece theater and stuff like that, and like Poirot and all that kind of stuff. And this reminded me of that. So I would like turn that on to try and like connect with her on some kind of thing. Like be like, look, I play games that are like your shows you like. And she didn't, yeah, she was like, whatever. But anyway, it's like that, I guess, kind of masterpiece theater kind of situation. Old BBC. It also came with the Sega Classics Arcade Collection. Didn't we already talk about this? Yeah, we did, but we talked about the newer version that came with 5 games. This has 4 games. Streets of Rage, Revenge of Shinobi, Columns, and Golden Axe. It's missing Super Monaco GP. Exact same games that's on the other one. Everything about this disc is exactly the same as the other arcade collection, except this one includes Super Monaco GP. Not really much to talk about there. This is the older version, so if you have the 4, that's a Model 1 pack-in, and the 5 was Model 2 pack-in. Sherlock Holmes, not really, yeah. If you get it for free like in a lot or something, I mean, yeah, pop it in, check it out, but not really. Sega Arcade Classics, absolutely. Great, wonderful, check that out. Not so much Sherlock Holmes. Now here we are to what I think is the most valuable game on the platform. I could be wrong, but it's definitely on up there. It's one of the top ones for sure. And definitely, I would say the most sought after, maybe? It's a beloved game. And I got a lot to talk about, to say about it. And that is Snatcher. Yes, Snatcher on the Sega CD. I'm sure you've at least heard about it. It's a hell of a game. It fluctuates so much, but in the neighborhood of $1,000. It has gone up, like way on up during the pandemic. I think it's close to $2,000. It was up more, everything was up more than around $1,000 for a complete inbox copy. Now we'll go ahead and say, right now, this is the actual box and the actual disc to Snatcher, but it is not the actual manual. That is an insert that I printed off. I don't have the manual to Snatcher. I do have the actual game of everything else, so I am on the lookout. If anybody has a manual to Snatcher that they're wanting to get rid of, let me know. I'll take it off your hands, especially if you want to give it to me for free to add to my collection. So it's not complete inbox, but it is the actual game. Okay, Snatcher. Is it as good as everybody says? Is it the amazing game that everyone leads everybody to think? Yeah, Snatcher is a pretty damn good game. It's a very unique game. It is very much like Rise of the Dragon. Was that the name of that one? Yeah, Rise of the Dragon. I don't know what's up with me and the titles of these games today on one of my favorite consoles. But anyway, it's very much in the same vein as Rise of the Dragon, an adventure visual novel with some RPG mechanics. You spend the vast majority of the game talking to people and picking things out of static images, but a huge portion of Snatcher is talking to people and then, you know, taking things you found in your inventory and seeing if they go here or there. It's very Blade Runner. You are searching after human cyborgs, and you are what's called a junker, which is essentially just a Blade Runner. It's heavily inspired by Blade Runner. The world, the characters, the story, everything. But it is such a cool, interesting, unique story. One of the reasons may be that this was, I don't know if it was his first game, but it was pre what he's known for. Hideo Kojima made this game. This was his game before Metal Gear. Before he went into the Metal Gear series, he made Snatcher. And this game, this version actually has a story as well. It's the best possible version that you could play, and it is on the Sega CD, and that's the only place. What's different about this one, there's multiple versions of the game. It actually originally came out on, I can't remember the name of the console. It's some offshoot console in like 1988 or 87. This version came out in 1993, I think, early 90s. It came to the States and to Sega CD. It has updated graphics. Some of the cutscenes have been updated to animated. It's had multiple updates, and this is the premier updated version. What this has that no other version has, because there is other Snatcher versions, you can get even US versions, this is the only US language version. The only version of Snatcher that you can get that has full voice. You can get subtitled, but fully voiced characters throughout pretty much the entire game is Snatcher on the Sega CD. A huge amount of the text is voiced, and it's a huge cast of characters. Like, you spend a ton of time listening to people speak, and including yourself. And it's just really cool. Hideo Kojima's games like Metal Gear, they get really convoluted, a bit too convoluted for me, honestly, especially the later ones. But this game, you see a lot of that there, but it never gets too convoluted like those games do. Unlike those games, this game is kind of like a visual novel, so you're supposed to just sit there and watch it and make choices and choose, you know, the right thing to say to someone or the right questions to ask and things like that. You play like Metal Gear Solid and like you're supposed to be playing a game, and then every now and then it has like an hour-long cutscene of just people talking. You're kind of like, oh my God, come on, get back to the gameplay. But here it works because that is the gameplay. So Snatcher is an awesome game. It has some shooting segments. I wasn't a huge fan of those, especially later on. There's a sequence closer to the end where you're traveling down this tunnel and you have multiple of these shooting segments, and they are kind of brutal. Like the difficulty, the game's not hard, but that part, all of a sudden out of nowhere, it gets pretty damn difficult. And it is just because it throws so much at you at once, and you can only miss so many times and you're dead and you gotta start over. And that gets a little tedious. That part was a bit tedious, but it's definitely doable. You can make it through it. You can use the Justifier, the blue gun that they had in the court trials and stuff. You can use that in the game if you are playing on a CRT, because it won't work on flat screens. But Snatcher is abso-flippin'-lutely worth playing. This game is wonderful. You see a lot of references to his later work. Metal Gear is mentioned quite a few times, and there's a character called Metal Gear, but lots of his work later on, you see it started here. So this is a fantastic game, worth playing. Is it worth $1,000? No, it's not. I don't know if any game's worth $1,000 or for me to play, but it is absolutely worth seeking out. There are other versions on consoles, yes, and they're not as much as this, but like I said, this version, only get it on the Sega CD. Yeah, go get an emulated copy or something, or if you got a copy of it, let me know. If anybody has a copy, like a legit copy of this game, let me know in the comments below, because you got some history right there. Don't ever let it go. It took me a long time to get into this game. I did not play it when it initially came out. I played it a few years back. Is the first time I played it. I tried playing this game probably 5 or 6 times before I actually got into it. Every time I would start it, it's like I would like where it started, and then when you got into the gameplay part, I don't know, it would just lose me, and I would give up too early. And then one day I pushed myself to continue on, to keep on, and it hooked me. And I figured out like how the game worked, like how it went along. And once I figured that out and got into the story, I couldn't stop. I loved it. Loved it. Hate that I waited so long to play it. So if you do give this game a chance, just be sure you put the time in. It's like a good TV show. When you start watching a new TV show at first, maybe it might take a little bit of time to hook you. You're learning the world and you're like, oh, this is a lot. And if you don't like stick it out for a few episodes, you might trail off. This is like, Snatcher's like that. Give it a few hours, and then next thing you know, you're just hooked and you can't stop, and you will be playing. It's a fairly lengthy game and pretty cool. This version also has an extra part at the end, because he had hoped to have a sequel and this be a series, and it wasn't. He saw that wasn't gonna happen. So this one has that kind of DLC, if you will, there at the end too. It doesn't close it off for further adventures, but it gives this story a bit of closure. And you didn't have that. The final chapter in this game was not in the original game. So this is the most complete version of the game that you can get. Snatcher, Sega CD, one of the best games on the console. And it really is. I can't say it enough. Check out Snatcher. It is a fantastic game. So it seems like we're on a roll now with just great games in the Sega CD. So I guess like the later, alphabetically, the later games are the better games, I guess. Because early on we had some stinkers. But here we go with another one of the Sega CD games that people think is just the best in a series, a well-established series. Many say the best in the series, and that would be Sonic CD. And you're like, why are you holding that box backwards? Because I don't have the booklet to it. It's the actual box and the disc, but I'm missing the book. Anybody got a Sonic CD book manual out there that you're wanting to let go of? Call me. Anyway, Sonic CD is available to play in tons of compilations nowadays. You probably have played it. You probably have a compilation. If you have any Sonic or Sega compilations, I bet Sonic CD's on there. You don't have to play this on Sega CD. If you have a Sega CD, sure, get it and play it. It's a great game to have for the console. Oddly enough, as much of a fan of the Sega CD as I was, and as much of a Sonic fan as I was and am, this was the one Sonic game that got away from me, that I didn't play as much. This and Sonic and Knuckles. I just, for whatever reason, didn't play this back in the day. I think I played it like once or twice, but I never owned it. I never played it hardcore. So it wasn't until my adult years, like the past few years, that I actually got Sonic CD and sat down and played it. I don't have that nostalgic feel for it because I didn't play it back then. It's a solid game. It's different than the other Sonic games though. It looks the same. It's a 2D side scroller. There's a lot more going on screen in this one. And also it has like this future and past thing where you have to like pass certain terminals at a certain speed, kind of like Back to the Future, and you'll either go forward in time or backwards in time, and then the level changes. It's a cool mechanic, I just haven't put the time into it. So oddly enough, as much of a Sega CD fan as I am, one of its biggest damn games, I just really don't have a lot of input on. What I have played of Sonic CD is fantastic. It's great. It's got a really cool opening animation. The game looks great. It sounds fantastic. Super fast. It's everything you want out of a Sonic 2D game is right here. I'm not gonna lie, the whole past and future thing, there's a big mechanic in it. I wanna say I don't like it, but that's because I haven't sat down and played it enough. I feel like if I spent some more time with it, I would enjoy it. But you know, I went for a while saying, oh, I don't really like that. But I do feel like if I gave it more time, I would enjoy it. I'm sure plenty of people out there have their own opinions on Sonic CD because it is kind of universally beloved. And I don't hate it, but I'm not one of those people that's like, Sonic CD is so great. But I feel like I'm gonna sit down and play this one day. I'm just gonna put the time in and sit down and really learn the game and and play it, and I'm gonna fall in love with it. Until that day though, Sonic CD is, yeah, it's pretty good. Sonic, if you like Sonic, you'll like this, I guess. Sonic CD. Everybody else says you should probably get this, by the way. So you know what time it is? That's right, it's time for another FMV game. Well, kind of an FMV game, very much in the vein of Dragon's Lair. In fact, the most Dragon's Lair game that's not Dragon's Lair on this list, and that would be Space Ace, also made by Don Bluth's company, or Don Bluth. This is essentially Dragon's Lair in space. That's it. Not the same game as in the story and what you see. It's a totally different animation, new story, new characters, but it's the exact same gameplay. You know, left, right, up, down, and action. That's it. That's it. You play through and it gives you prompts. This, much like Dragon's Lair, is available not quite as much as Dragon's Lair, but you can find a more modern version of this available probably on consoles and stuff like that somewhere. I know it's on PC and it's been available in other places. You don't have to play this on Sega CD, but this is a great version of the game. It looks good. It actually looks better than Dragon's Lair. This is a really nice transfer of the game. If you love Dragon's Lair, you will love this. They are one and the same as far as gameplay goes, and even the vibe of the animation. This one's even more so. It's got more speaking in it. Dragon's Lair didn't really have any speaking. It had a couple of lines here or there, but this has more interaction between the characters. And this is a really cool game. It's a bit harder. Its levels are typically a bit longer than Dragon's Lair, or its sections, and it throws a lot more at you in quick succession than Dragon's Lair did, more often. But it's totally doable. It has the prompts, the little flashes on the screen of which direction to hit or what to do. Yeah, it's a really solid port. If you love Dragon's Lair, check out Space Ace. Good time. And we got more FMV goodness. In fact, I think a lot of the rest of the list is going to be FMV goodness, so strap in and get ready for that. And this one has a bit of a story to this game beyond the actual game itself, and it's Surgical Strike. This is very much in the vein of Ground Zero Texas, and it's kind of a mix between Ground Zero Texas and Sewer Shark. It is on rails, but it's nowhere near as fast as Sewer Shark. It's just moving around a city, but it's slower. You're like in a tank. It's like hover tanks or something, and you got different weapons you can shoot at the enemies and stuff like that. It's that simple. It's super cheesy B-movie 90s Cinemax action, and that's what you're here for. You're here for that cheeso video, and the gameplay is fine. The gameplay's solid. It does what it says on the box. Just go around and you shoot things, and if you miss, you get shot and you start over. I mean, that's all there is to it. It's not a deep game, but it is a fun, entertaining game, mainly due to the video that they shot is so over the top and fun and entertaining. That's what FMVs are supposed to do, make an entertaining flick that you can interact with, and the interaction can be limited enough so you can still pay attention to what's going on. This one's claim to fame is that if you look here on the front of the box, it's Surgical Strike, and it says free 32X CD offer inside. We haven't really talked about it. The Sega CD, or the Sega 32X, had a handful of games. You had to have a Genesis, a 32X, and a Sega CD to play. With the Sega CD games, you just have to have the Genesis and the Sega CD, but there were a handful where you had to add a 32X to that to make them work properly. Many of them had a Sega CD version and a 32X version. 32X version usually looked better, didn't really sound better, but it looked better mainly. And if you look inside my book here, I have that little mail-in coupon still. I wonder if I mail it in if I'll get Surgical Strike on Sega CD. Well, even if that address is still good and there's someone there who would take my mail, no, I wouldn't. Why? Because it never came out. People sent it in and they never got their Surgical Strike on Sega CD. Surgical Strike came out late in the Sega CD and the 32X's lifespan. It was made but never released. Some say in Brazil it did have a very limited release, but you can't get actual confirmation of that. It did get re-released in like 2018 or something like that in Brazil of Surgical Strike on the Sega or the 32X CD. And that, I would love to have that. If anybody knows where I can find one of those for cheap, I'll take it, but it ain't cheap. Those things cost a lot. It is, I don't know if it's a 100% official release, but it is the actual 32X game, and it is seen as official. It's officially released by somebody. It is out there, but man, they're expensive. So if anybody got one you're wanting to come off of, call me. Again, when you talk about Surgical Strike, that's what most people remember, is that whole story about how they promised the 32X CD version and it just never materialized. But then it finally did 25 years later. As far as the game itself, yeah, it's fun. It's fun. If you're into those, as we've talked about on this list so far, those FMV on rails-ish shooters, this is fun. You'll enjoy it. If you like that kind of video, you'll have a good time with Surgical Strike. So now we have one of the few aviation-based non-FMV games on the Sega CD, and that would be AH-3 Thunderstrike. Now this is a first-person helicopter battle game. It's kind of like Desert Strike, but from a first-person or a cockpit view. I don't have a ton of experience with this game. I played it a little bit. What I remember of it, it's fine. For the time, it looks good. Its graphics are 3D, they're 2D, but they look 3D. You move in a 3D space, kinda. I just can't give much on this one. I've tried it, but I can't say whether it's great or not because I don't really remember much about it. Are there any AH-3 Thunderstrike fans out there? Let me know what you think of AH-3 Thunderstrike. It's a really weird name. I just want to call it Thunderstrike. But let me know what you think of Thunderstrike and if it is a good game and I just don't know what I'm missing and I just need to pop it in and play it and I'll just be engrossed for hours and hours to come. I don't think I will, but maybe, who knows? Yeah, Thunderstrike. Back to the good stuff, FMVs. Now this is an FMV that is kind of sought after. It's worth a decent amount complete in box. This is actually a reproduction box that I made because this is another one of those cardboard box games that I just had a loose copy of. So this isn't the actual box, but it is the actual game, and it is Time Gal. Time Gal's another one of those Revenge of the Ninja, Road Avenger, made by the same company. It's that type of game. But there's one difference with Time Gal and those games. It is an animated anime game where you're left, right, up, down in action. We've talked about that a lot today. And it is made by that same company. It's got some cool animation. It's really weird. Like, its story is out there, man. It's got this scantily clad chick, as you can see on here, running around throughout time. It is very Dragon's Lair, Revenge of the Ninja, Road Avenger, as I mentioned. They did change one key thing that I'm not a huge fan of. What they did was they tightened up the response time. Like, you get the prompt of the right, left, up, down action, and the amount of time from when you get the prompt to when you need to input the prompt is very minuscule. It's very tight. So that means that the game just is a lot of trial and error, which those types of games are already a lot of trial and error, but you can get by with like Dragon's Lair, Space Ace, even Road Avenger especially. It's perfect. But Road Avenger and Revenge of the Ninja, you can get by and do decently well without having that trial and error. This one, it's so quick and so tight that you pretty much just got to memorize what it is for each level, what the order of how the right, left, up, down action, and do that at the right times. And even then, it's kind of difficult. I didn't like that as much about it. I do like the animation style. It's very anime. It's not very, it is anime. On here it says it's 30 minutes, over 30 minutes of full motion animation. So the game is about 30 minutes long. That's kind of run of the mill. That's about what these types of games usually run. That tightening it up of the response time really makes the game more difficult than it needs to be. That false difficulty, if you will, takes away from the experience, takes away from the fun. You replay sections way more than you should. And it's not always because you didn't have the skill, it's just because the response time is so tight. I really wish they had added like 1 second after in between from when it tells you what to do and you have to do it. If they had added 1 second, that would have been all you needed. It is still playable. You can still get by, but man, you don't have quite as much freedom to pay attention to what's going on screen. It's more you're just looking for prompts. So you can't really pay attention to what's happening. You're just waiting for the prompt and just stressing out the whole time. Action, left and right, and it kind of takes away from the experience a bit. It's a decent experience, but that does mar it. If it wasn't for that, I'd say it was a great experience like Road Warrior and Revenge of the Ninja, what I played at that. But if you like those games, same company, same type of game, give Time Gal a chance. But Time Gal has gone up quite a bit in price. Not sure of the exact price now, but it is worth a decent amount, especially if it's complete in box, which this is not. This is another one of the ones, like I mentioned, that had the cardboard box, and I made this box just so it would look nice on my shelf. Yeah, Time Gal, it's pretty good, but it has that one major fault. All right, so we're almost to the end, and these last two, before we get into hardware, are games that I really enjoy. This one I hated for decades, until more recently, honestly, and that would be Tomcat Alley. Tomcat Alley is an F-18 or jet fighter, as it says here, jet fighter combat, full screen interactive movie, all video action. This is another Sega True Video production. Many of the FMV games on the Sega CD and other consoles as well, they were kind of a smaller screen, like with a border to varying degrees. Sometimes it was a very small screen, sometimes it was, you know, half the screen. This one is full screen. The production values on this game are phenomenal. I mean, like, this is like Top Gun the game. It does have like that 90s B-movie action vibe going for it. But this one's a little bit more serious. They have real jets in it. There are models, but it's shot so well, you can't always tell. There's real jets in it, but the models and the way that they shot them, it is expertly done. It's an exciting game. However, this game is absolutely one of those games that you got to read the frickin' manual. So I had this game when I was a kid, and I hated it. I could not figure out how to play the game. I kept trying to play it. For whatever reason, I was illiterate or something. I wouldn't read the manual, or at least the parts that told you how to do it. I thought I knew how to play it, and it just wasn't working, and it irritated me. I liked what the game, like how it looked and what it was presenting. I did not like the gameplay. Most of the gameplay is you targeting ships, firing at them, shooting off chaff and stuff like that to like get away from missiles and things of that nature. So there is a bit of actual gameplay of like targeting the ships, more of like a timing game of like when to fire and things like that. So it's a little bit more gameplay than a lot of the FMV games are. The vast majority of it is just watching video and choosing the right selection, the right prompt, if you will. It is not readily apparent of what you're specifically supposed to be doing. Like, you have to like choose your radio to radio people, and you have to like choose different ammunitions and things like that. It's not complicated, but it's not apparent of how to do it, the way you're supposed to do it in the game in order to progress. So I wasn't doing that a lot. So like, people would like radio us in, and I was not radioing them back, or like when I fired, I wasn't sure. I don't know. It's been a while since I played it. I'd heard someone say, oh, Tomcat Alley is really great. And I was like, really? That game sucks. I even played it when I reacquired it for this collection here. When I first played it, I was like, this game still sucks. But then I read the manual and I figured it out, and I said, okay, I wasn't aware of that, of how these little nuances in the gameplay. Sat down and played it. Holy crap, I was enjoying myself, had a good time. It's a fun game. If you like FMVs, that's the caveat here. It is a fun FMV game that does that perfect mix of giving you just enough to keep you engaged in the game, to make you feel like you are playing a game, that you're contributing, but also giving you enough free time, if you will, or not having you so concentrated on something on the screen to where you can still enjoy what's happening. And I really like that about it. This is a game actually I've had before shooting this video sitting out on my table over here, because I want to remember I want to play through this game. I feel as if you could probably play through it fairly quickly. It's probably not a very long game. Most of these FMVs aren't, but this is one that for decades, literal decades, I've hated this game and thought it was trash, and here recently I discovered, oh, it's not. I was trash. It's actually a pretty good game, and I really want to get back into it. So yeah, Tomcat Alley, I strongly recommend checking it out if you do enjoy FMVs. It is one of the more gameplay-centric FMV games that were in the actual FMV original genre. So yeah, give it a chance. Read the manual though, read that manual. It's the simple little things that make it all click. The little things about how like you need to click on this and then that just kind of like open, and you're like, oh, well, that makes sense after I read it, because on screen it doesn't make sense, because these games didn't tell you anything within the game. So yeah, Tomcat Alley, check it out, man. It's really great. Awesome, awesome, awesome production values. Okay, for the last game on the list, this is a pretty cool game too. It's an FMV game, I know, shocker. This is another True Video, Sega True Video production, and it is seen as a good game by those that play it. But not a lot of people are aware of this game. You don't hear a lot about it. And that is Wirehead, Sega True Video production, but it's also in conjunction with MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, the movie company. You see that on the screen. The production values here are really high. This was a later in the lifespan release. Let's see if we got a date here anywhere. 1995. This is the latest that I've looked up so far, release thus far. So this is a very high production value. MGM, you could tell that they were taking part in here because everything on screen looks great. It has a little goofy appeal to it. I mean, look at the box there. The whole premise to the game, in fact, is ridiculous. This guy right here, the dad of this family, he's like a John Hughes-esque family. You know, he's living in suburbia, and he's got like this module on his head with a wirehead, and there's a remote control that people can control him with for some reason. I don't know. I probably played about a third to a half of the game, and it is not explained during that time. But then people come looking for him, and you are in control of him at that point. Because it even shows in the beginning, like his kids get the remote, and they're like laughing while he's answering the door, and like making him do stupid stuff. I'm like, why does this guy have this wire in his head that allows people to control him? And it, like, everybody's just cool with it, but whatever. But then you get to control him and get him away from these bad guys. And he goes on some crazy antics where he's going through the street, and it just like explodes into this huge action movie. Like he's taking off and doing skateboarding, and there's explosions and car wrecks, and just like, look at the cover. All that's like that's the craziness of this game. But this dude the whole time is like, oh, what am I doing? It's crazy, it's manic, and it's like non-stop. That is one thing about this game. It like starts and just like goes 1,000 miles a minute. It was a really fun game if you're into the FMV genre. It is, once again, the whole right, left, up, down action button kind of prompts thing. There's not a lot of gameplay like with Tomcat Alley or Sewer Shark. You're not shooting anything. It's just that you're just picking the right input at the right time, and then you watch what happens. But there's a lot. It does throw a lot at you really quick. It really skirts the line of being just enough to where you can pay attention to what's going on screen, and to where you're so laser focused because it's throwing so much at you that you can't even pay attention to what's on screen. You're just paying attention to prompts. It's real close to being too much. For the most part, I was able to pay attention to what was going on screen and have a good time with it. I think that's just perfect. That means they put just the right amount in there. For me, dialed it back just a smidge, because the whole time I felt like, oh, I'm right there where I'm not gonna be, I'm feel like I gotta pay a lot of attention to these prompts. No, it's not quite there. You are able to still enjoy the FMV-ness of this FMV game. If you're into FMVs like many of the other FMVs here, except for the bad ones, I strongly suggest checking out Wirehead. It's a great time and has some just absolutely phenomenal production values. Now, that was all the games that I have. It's not the biggest collection in the world. I think it's somewhere around like 20-something to 30-something games. I didn't even count it. 32 games. I want more Sega CD games, and I'm definitely buying more, but Sega CD games, complete in box at least, are getting pretty pricey. Some of them are quite pricey. I mean, you can find some that are cheaper. There's less and less of them every year, so they're getting more and more rare, so they're just going up in value. There's quite a few games on the console that I really want to get my hands on. We're not quite done. Let's talk about hardware real quick before we get out of here. There are a couple of neat little nuances about that. I'm not gonna really get into like controllers and stuff because that's more Genesis centric. As far as like the hardware goes for the Sega CD, they did have 2 models. There were some revisions within each of those models. I'm not gonna get into that. The only other hardware, and I'm not considering the 32X, would be the CD backup RAM card. If you're gonna get a Sega CD and actually play it, if you want to play the game, especially any type of like RPG or anything that's not an FMV, you don't really need it for FMVs, but like any of the bigger games, you've gotta get this. The Sega CD does have internal memory. It's run off a CMOS battery, and if you have a Sega CD and that battery is the original battery from when the Sega CD came out, it don't work. The internal save function is tied to that CMOS battery, so when it dies, not only can you not save games, any progress you had saved is gone. All your saves just disappear. So you need to get this RAM card. This thing is just going up every few months, every year. It just goes up and up and up and up. This is one thing that does not go down. That is because it is so integral to like actually owning the system and playing it. If you want to play it effectively, you need to save, and you need one of these. It's a memory card, effectively. It's the memory card. There may be some third parties, I don't know, but you need this or something like it, and they are not getting any cheaper by any means. Last I checked, these things are getting kind of ridiculous for a memory card. Must have if you're gonna have a Sega CD and actually want to use it and play it regularly. Now, like I mentioned, there are 2 models of the Sega CD. There's the Model 1 and the Model 2. I have both of them. Back in the day, I had the Model 1 first, and then it broke, and I got a Model 2. Now, for years and years, it's always been kind of known that the Model 1 motor loader, the internal that pops out, the stacked one, I don't know what I'm saying here. The Model 1 is not very reliable. Now, there's a reason for that. It's actually a multitude of reasons, but one of the reasons is because the power brick on this thing, you had to plug it in separately from the Genesis. If you have a 32X, you have 3 plugs at that point. Now, 2 of those plugs out of the 3 are interchangeable size-wise, but not by their polarity. So if you switch those up, it's gonna fry your Sega CD. It's gonna send too much to it and fry it. I actually did this, unbeknownst to me at the time, I was a kid. But what it actually does is there's an internal fuse within the Sega CD that will pop, and you can replace that. Now nowadays, I can do that. I've done that. It's not really hard to do. Back in the day, I didn't know that. Nobody really knew that. Now the Model 2 is similar to that, but it's just not as finicky. The Model 2 is admittedly a more reliable console. You just see less of them go out. You're gonna have laser issues maybe, but you even have less laser issues with the Model 2. If somebody came to me and said, which one should I get? I'm getting a Sega CD, should I get the Model 1 or Model 2? I'd probably tell them to get a Model 2 just because I know that typically they are gonna be a more reliable system than the Model 1. Now that's not to say that the Model 1 is as unreliable as we thought. Like I said, it was just that we didn't know about the polarity thing. You gotta make sure you got the right plug in there or it's gonna be bad. Model 2 though is fantastic. It's the top loader or side loader, I guess technically, and it's a good system. It looks good. It doesn't look as sexy as the Model 1 in my opinion. There's something about the Model 1 that just really speaks to me and I love it, and it just says peak Genesis Sega CD era. And it's really the only way to do the Tower of Power. You can do the Tower of Power with the side loader for sure, but the Tower of Power, OG Tower of Power with bottom loader, Genesis, 32X, that is the Tower of Power. And of course you've got all the other stuff, which I've got that stuff that you can add on top of it. Ridiculous effect. The true Tower of Power, that's how you do it. There's something about that Model 1 that just really speaks to me. Now the Model 2 had this little extension you could put on it, so you could actually put a Model 1 Genesis on it. As you see here, I have a Model 2 Genesis on mine, and it was clearly made for the Model 2 Genesis. The Model 2 looks so much better with the Model 2 Sega CD. The Model 2 Genesis with the Model 2 Sega CD. They're made for each other, literally. Now the Model 1 is going for a ton of money right now. Last time I checked, it's somewhere just the unit itself, no wires, no nothing, over $500. That is insane. Now this particular model I got for about 40 bucks. Not that long ago. That's crazy. Why? It didn't work. That thing's a beast. Was the fuse popped? Yes, it absolutely was, but the fun didn't end there. There was a spot right past where the power comes in. Apparently, it had had such a surge in power right here that it entered the system, and before it even got to the fuse, it overloaded so big that there was a huge scorch mark that went through the board and blew multiple traces, literally blew them off the board. It looks like somebody shot this thing with like a laser. I saw that and I was like, well, nothing I could do there. I could not find anything else saying how this had happened to other people. Like the traces, that's the part underneath the PCB, the board, the part the electricity flows on and the information flows on, were gone. They were blown off the board and just, it was like charred. I cleaned it up as best as I could. There's this big hole and a dent in the board itself, the power board, and I ran my own traces. I'd never done this before. I'd never repaired, like really repaired a trace. I'd done like a little bit of a repair on the end, but like actually like in the middle, repairing a trace from A to B, I'd never really done that beyond bypassing it with my own wire. This was extremely difficult work. You're working with very fine wire. It was like 3 traces, I think it was. And then you had the spot where it was burned out. There was a fuse there too, a wholly different fuse. This was a ceramic fuse. And I didn't really know exactly how it was all supposed to come together because it was all gone and fried. But I did the best I could. I just used some common sense and some knowledge I had and put this all together. And I knew for sure this thing wasn't gonna work. But then I powered it on and holy crap, I was blown away that this thing actually came on and worked. I was like, oh my God, I got it to work. The disk drive was like barely used. This thing must have been fried shortly after whoever had it got got it. Inside was beautiful beyond that spot where it looked like somebody shot it with a laser gun. The system was damn near close to new, on the inside at least. And now it works. I've got like a brand new system. Hallelujah! So yeah, I really lucked out there. I paid about 40 bucks for this unit, and now it's worth like over $500. I don't plan on ever selling this thing because I absolutely love it. This is the Sega CD, the Model 1 that I play all my Sega CD games on now. Every time I turn this thing on, I get like this sense of pride, and I feel good, and it's almost like it takes me back in time just a little bit to when I was a young teen. I love the Model 1, and I love this Model 1 even more. I know that didn't really apply to everybody with a Sega CD because, I mean, most people aren't gonna go through that journey with their Sega CD, but hey, this is my collection. That's part of my collection. It's one of my stories, so I thought I'd share. Now, there are a couple of other games, like I mentioned a moment ago, that are Sega CD 32X games. I didn't really want to cover these extensively in this video. I feel like these fall more into the 32X pile, if you will, and I'll eventually do that video. I'm trying to build a complete 32X collection. I think this is every single one of them. Corpse Killer, Fahrenheit, Night Trap, the granddaddy of them all, Slam City featuring Scottie Pippen, and Supreme Warrior. I'm not gonna take the time to talk about them today. Every single one of them is an FMV game. I will say that much. Fahrenheit has the Sega CD version and the Sega 32X CD version. That's kind of neat and good value there. They came in like a different box. It's a hard cardboard box that I always thought was kind of premium, even though it's actually cheaper than the plastic one, but whatever. I thought they looked cool too with their yellow and black. Mainly, I wanted to mention that because being such a Sega CD fan and talking about my collection, I know that the whole of Night Trap wasn't in there, and people that are like, you got a Sega CD, you're an FMV fan, and you don't have Night Trap? Oh, I have Night Trap. I have Night Trap. I just have it on the 32X. I still want to get it on the Sega CD, but it's really expensive. And seeing as how I have like 15 different versions of Night Trap, because I have it on 3DO, I have it on the PC, I have it on the Xbox, or I think it's on the Xbox or one of the PlayStations, I have it on the 32X. I think I got another version of it somewhere. To pay a ton of money for the Sega CD version, I don't know. I feel like there's other things I could spend that money on right now. One day I'll come across that perfect deal on Night Trap on Sega CD and I'll pick it up for the collection. There are more games. We'll just talk about them another day. So yeah, guys, that is the Sega CD collection, or my Sega CD collection. That's what I've got. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know it's not as many games as I had with the Xbox, and I can get a little bit chatty and wordy about these games sometimes. Also, I know FMVs aren't everybody's cup of tea. They're actually not most people's cup of tea, but I really enjoy them. There has been quite the resurgence in FMVs in the past 5 to 8 years, by the way, especially Wales Interactive. They're a company that are making new FMVs that aren't cheesy. They're making like legit movie FMVs that are actually pretty cool. Go on Steam or something like that. They're on the modern consoles too. You've got the Bunker, Late Shift, I think is one of them. The Compound, that I'm pretty sure it was the Compound or Complex. That's a really cool one as well. They're a really nice experience, and they are more of the pick an action or pick an answer or something like that. So they're a little bit more laid back. There's not a lot of gameplay to them, but these movies are of high quality, and for the most part, they're pretty serious. They're not that goofy cheesiness of previous FMVs, which I love and I kind of miss, but I understand things got to evolve. I hope I did show that while yes, FMVs had a hell of a presence on the console, they're not the only games on the console. There's quite a few other bangers on there. In fact, my favorite game on the console isn't an FMV, even though I love FMVs. You got Flashback, Snatcher, things like that. Fantastic games that I absolutely implore you to go check out at some point, some way. There it is, guys. I'm gonna stop talking now. I actually just released the story of the PlayStation 3 Beyond Arrogance. Go check that out if you would. I put a lot of work into that one. I also have another one of these videos that I'm gonna shoot right after I get done with this one, and it deals with a console that's right down in here that you can't see. But it's a console that I have actually had people request that I do one of these videos for. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. That should be coming soon in between the story of videos as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments below if you loved the Sega CD. If you hated the Sega CD, no need to let me know, but let me know if you loved it. And if you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all that stuff you're supposed to do. You guys have an awesome day. I love every single one of you. You're awesome. Peace, love, chicken grease. Have a good one. Bye, I'm out.